Welcome to today's Corporate Venturing Insider series. Today, I am so excited to have Victoria with us. She's our very first repeat interviewee. And I don't have repeat interviewees because I do one firm, one podcast. But Victoria moved on since nearly 100 podcasts ago. She was our number three podcast. And now she has two jobs. So we are going to ask her about how she managed that because to me, when I talk to her, it's like two full time jobs. Victoria, welcome.
Thank you so much, Nicola. It's a privilege to be back.
Thank you. So let's start with the two roles you have, the Extreme Tech Challenge, Walden Catalyst Ventures. Do you mind maybe 3 minutes on each, just to have a good sense about what their respective missions are?
Yeah, so I'll start with the Extreme Tech Challenge, or we call it XTC for short. Extreme Tech Challenge, we are the world's leading startup ecosystem and platform to support founders that are addressing the UN Sustainable Development Goals. So, the sole mission as a US based nonprofit is to find amazing companies that are doing amazing things to change the world and give them what we call our secret sauce, right? The power of the community to help them scale. So that means access to potential investors. We have a massive VC community that supports our work. That also means potential access to CVC, such as yourself, corporate executive, venture capital, open innovation staff, and also global visibility because we partner with large tech conferences all over the world to host our startup competitions, showcases, panel discussions, fireside chats, so that we can create the avenue by which the founders can be seen. And then lastly, it is about mentorship, about helping these founders to create relationships that can help them far into the future. Wrapping up XTC, we have this now. I think the secret sauce of XTC really lies in the strength of the community, that we have global footprint. And it's been amazing to help drive our founders' vision and growing this really wonderful ecosystem.
Okay, and maybe while we are still on XTC, what are the outputs? Because for so many years, there
Yeah.
are so many success stories. So maybe if you can speak to the output of that.
Yeah, so over the last 4 years since I've been with the organization, we've had over 10,000 founders that have come through our events and programming, and that's global footprint from over 120 countries across vast majority of the innovation centers that you and I are familiar with. And then together, over the last few years, our cohort of over 250 finalists and winners have collectively sort of raised billions and billions of dollars that help to scale, and also I think the output is also helping people bridge into high growth and high potential markets. And then we also value diversity, equity, inclusion. So I would say 36% of our participants are women. So we continue to create a safe space for underrepresented and minority founders to be seen, be heard, and help them to be successful on their journey.
Very meaningful. Now let's move to Walden Catalyst Ventures, which is not a lesser job in any way.
Right. So, Walden Catalyst Ventures, we are a global VC based in Silicon Valley, and investing in deep tech, early stage deep tech company, focusing on a couple of different sectors, on semiconductor and ecosystem, on AI and data infrastructure, and select applications that we've done deals in tech bio, robotics, and tooling. We're headquartered in Silicon Valley, but with offices in Europe and Israel. So the mandate is to really invest and help build the next generation of category defining businesses in deep tech.
Now, if we think about the same question about outputs, how many investments have you made? What does
Mhm.
it look like?
Yeah, so we launched in summer of 2021, and we've made 16 investments. We typically lead or co-lead these investments across the U.S., Europe, and Israel, and it's been really terrific to be having a front seat at this incredible innovations that these founders are creating. And what I want to mention is that it is such a privilege to be on this team. The Walden Catalyst Ventures was founded by two legendary semiconductor industry captains, Young Song and Lip-Bu Tan, who have just amazing track record and amazing wealth of resource and network um, as corporate executives, as entrepreneurs themselves, and as operators. So it's such a privilege to be a part of the team.
And I think I will double click on this, which is they are legendary, they are operators. It's a very, very small team given the AUM. Can you
Right.
speak to, because most people think that as AUM grows, the team needs to grow and all that comes with getting fatter. That's
Yeah.
not Walden Catalyst Ventures. Can you speak to that?
We are such a lean team, and I really think that's also our secret sauce. Is that the team came together with Youngsun and Lip-Bu as founding partners. So we have two founding managing partners, Young and Lip-Bu. We have five GPs. So half of the team came from Samsung Catalyst Fund, which is one of the VCs of Samsung Electronics, and half of the team came from Lip-Bu's VC called Walden International. So we have five GPs and partners, and then we have a head of marketing, director of marketing that handles global marketing activities. We have a CFO who also is CFO for Walden International Funds as well. And then we have me heading ecosystem, but we do have an administrative and finance staff. But there is no junior staff on the investment team, so it's quite unusual. And I think that really speaks to perhaps our advantage is that all of the GPs are experienced and deep tech investors. So they have very, very deep domain knowledge, domain expertise. They have an incredible network to draw from, to draw to source deal flow from. And they have a track record. So the team collectively have been investing together for over 30 years in about just over 600 deep tech companies, of which 138 of them have gone public. So that's an incredible, incredible track record. And I think the reason why we do not have junior staff is that so that the partners work directly with the founders. The partners are directly sort of in touch with the trends, the analysis, what's happening on the ground, and instead of having things being filtered up from the junior staff level. So I think that speaks to the incredible strength on the domain expertise and also the network of the firm. It's quite different.
Which I guess is like the superpower. It's like this direct access to top senior people with amazing network. But venture capital is so much of the work is also grunt work, which they have to do. And that's on top of everything they do with for their entrepreneurs and the portfolio companies. So
Mhm.
it's still a trade-off that's difficult to comprehend. How do they manage?
Do the work. I think you have experience, you have repeat success, and it's really all the partners, all the investment partners do their own grunt work as well. It's quite remarkable. And this is on top of working directly with portfolio companies. This is on top of, because we only lead or co lead investments, that means the partners take a board seat. So that means, being a part of the board, working directly with the founders, working directly with the board, helping the founders scale as well with customer introductions, and also with helping to build a team. So you're right, it's a massive amount of work,
Yeah.
but we are company builders. We partner with visionary founders to help them build companies so that we roll up our sleeves to build.
It's amazing. Let's talk about the ecosystem function. So this is a very small team. Everyone is senior, but ecosystem is not a very common function, even for bigger VCs.
Mhm.
How would you give the best pitch possible for why a VC should consider an ecosystem function? And I should preface by saying, I think you're the best ecosystem person I know. And maybe something I didn't tell you before. When I was looking for my ecosystem principal, I basically said, I want someone like Victoria.
Oh, I'm so flattered. And you did tell me this before.
Okay, I did. Okay.
I'm so flattered. I think ecosystem is it really encompasses a number of things, right? So how I understand it and how I define it is bring the right relationship to the firm and help create the community that enables the firm's mission. So that can encompass many different things, right? The work that you do, the relationship that you bring forth could be helping to highlight your founders. It could be helping to source deal flow. It could be helping to strengthen visibility and relationships with potential co-investors or upstream or downstream VC partners. So I think it's quite a wide-ranging role that I feel super privileged to be in a position to help drive and also help to define that role as we grow as well.
So let's talk about defining the role. How did you iterate on the role since you joined to today? How did you make it exactly yours and for maximum impact?
Well, I think it's really aligning with the goal of the firm of Walden Catalyst, right? So, and I think it's continuously staying close to leadership to understand what are the needs of the firm. And also, I have that other job. Leading Extreme Tech Challenge, which is a massive global ecosystem. So I have to say, the work I'm doing at Extreme Tech Challenge, which is independent, right? It's two different organizations. It's completely independent, but I think there's so many synergies and crossovers as that as I'm building a global ecosystem to support the work of Extreme Tech Challenge, it is the same ecosystem that overlaps with Walden Catalyst. So I think it's quite synergistic.
I think it's very synergistic, and one of the co-founders, Young Sun, for both. So, can you talk to the synergies? Because one is extremely early stage. Walden Catalyst is not necessarily early stage. So, is it like a pipeline from one to the other? Or how do you think about the synergies between the two?
Well, I would say we didn't start. I mean, Extreme Tech Challenge came first, so it's not like we started Extreme Tech Challenge or Young. Young is the co-founder of Extreme Tech Challenge, who's also the founding managing partner of Walden Catalyst. So because of Young, that's why I can be in a position to have both jobs at the same time. So Extreme Tech Challenge came first, and as a nonprofit that solely has a mandate of supporting global entrepreneurship to address the UN Sustainable Development Goals. So, as you know, been involved and been supporting XTC for the last many years. That we're like a buffet of innovation, right? We cover every sector under the sun and every stage of development, and the events and programs and activities we put together really depends on who our event partner or program partner is, right? So we could be doing things in ag tech and food tech. We've done events on decarbonization, on very climate specific. We've done events and programs around AI and energy, which really overlaps with Walden Catalyst in that case, but it's completely independent. Where Walden Catalyst has a very specific thesis, right? And the partners, they could look at hundreds and thousands of companies and make a handful of investments.
Mm.
So I have to say, Walden Catalyst, the partners do look at the deals from Extreme Tech Challenge, although no investments have been made so far, but do look at the deals. But really, I think the Walden Catalyst aspect is really the partners volunteering and devoting their time and expertise to help us judge, evaluate, help us find the finalists and winners of these competitions, but also helping to mentor and helping to come and speak at our events. So I think, if anything, it's more of a contribution from the Walden Catalyst side to support Extreme Tech Challenge.
Which I think speaks to what you said earlier about the power of community. Although I'm sure you mean way more than that. So maybe we can double click on that part, which is the power of community, which is not just a cohort of a given year, but everyone before. Can you explain how you can harness that power?
Oh, I think it sounds easy, right? There's so many people
No, no,
building.
it sounds very hard. Don't get me. Don't.
I think the hard part is, how do you keep people coming back?
Yeah.
That's the hard part. How do you consistently have people come back year after year, event after event, but also how do you bring new people to the ecosystem? Um, so I think over the years, and you met when I was doing sort of similar job at the University of California system, and that was a big buffet of innovation across 10 UC schools, 5 medical centers, and 3 national laboratories. So I think along the way, I've sort of learned um, my playbook for creating communities. So I'll share my couple of thoughts on this. I think ultimately the goal is to create experiences where people find valuable.
Hmm.
And that could be from the founder's side, that's from the judges and mentors, evaluators, so from the corporate executives, CVC and VC side. And also we have stakeholders from government, policymakers, NGOs, IGOs, like the United Nations is part of our community as well. So if you look at sort of our focus over the last few years, have really been leaning into deep tech and leaning into AI. A lot of what's happening right now, what drives those decisions, have a policy implication, or really policy is driving it. So we also bring policy stakeholders and other NGOs and ecosystem builders to our event. So I think one is absolutely you have to have uh, consistent, high quality experiences for all stakeholders.
I mean, when you talk about ecosystem, you really mean the full ecosystem. But what I find amazing is that you're thinking about the experiences for every stakeholders in that ecosystem.
Yeah.
And when we think about entrepreneurs, they try to transform industries, they want to change the status quo, and yet you find a way for them to leverage the ecosystem. That's not easy. Maybe you can talk to us about a story from the entrepreneur starting and how you've helped them with the ecosystem play for them to be more successful.
Yeah, I would say the past winners and finalists of our competitions over the last few years, over 250, less than 300 member cohort, 95% have gone on to raise investments, and 80% of them have done so from our ecosystem. Um, so I think I also, when I was at UC, I oversaw the 70 incubators accelerators across the system. So if you're doing just an incubator accelerator, you have a handful of companies, right? And how do you do that in scale? I think it's something that's really unique to what we do at XTC, and also across different countries. So I would say what enables to do this for us with scale is being very meaningful in curating groups where people can form relationships, maintain new relationships, and also bring people back periodically for gatherings so that you can help strengthen those relationships. But it's hard, right? You can't do them one by one. You have to think about frameworks and methodologies to be able to, and processes to be able to do this in scale, in which we have done that. So that's sort of the in-person and virtual experience, but also storytelling aspect, which I know you're such an expert. You're so deep in that as well. Is it's not enough to do the work, but you have to tell people that you're doing the good work. You have to tell people about the amazing success stories that's coming out of your community. So we really have invested into our marketing and communications and um, digital assets and producing media that helps us tell the stories, because those things will resonate, and also those messages will transcend the in-person experience, because there's only a number of people that you can host for in person, right? We've had events for over 1,200 people, and we have smallers, but I think nowadays online is the virtual town hall, and you have to be able to tell that story as well.
Yeah, I think when we think about success story, and I think you think the same way, which is it's not the success story of Walden Catalyst Ventures or TDK Ventures. It's of our portfolio companies, of the entrepreneurs, of what they are building. And if you tell their success stories, then other entrepreneurs want to join in.
Oh, that's exactly right. And it is really about creating a flywheel of success, a flywheel of success for founders, which then you attract the attention of investors and corporate executives. So I think that's how you strengthen and amplify the community. So in addition to doing startup showcases and competitions, which we're known for, over the last 4 years, we've also incorporated thought leadership. So we would do panel discussions and fireside chats, and because so that you can have some context around, well, why we're showcasing, why we're doing an event on semiconductor AI, or why does ag tech and food tech matter. So I think it's bringing the thought leadership aspect of it that really complements the startup highlighting piece that makes it very cohesive. From my experience, to create the right avenue by which to bring people together.
I think the flywheel of success is one of these golden nuggets. You need to find a way where this is self-repeating, self-reinforcing.
Absolutely. And also thinking about all the hard work that needs to happen behind the scenes and able to make that happen, from an administrative point of view, from an operations point of view, just so that you can execute, right? So, for instance, a typical startup competition, we will get hundreds, sometimes thousands of applications. And how do you sort through that?
Mm.
And we don't do any judging. We invite, which you are a member as well, our global evaluation committee that's comprised of over 500 invite only VCs and CVCs. So you have to be active investors, you have to be check writers to help us sort of evaluate. But you need to have a process by which you can filter and sort, so that it's very, very heavy operationally. But we've created our playbook for doing so, which enables us to do this much work with such a small team. And then we leverage the power of the community, the volunteers, to help us build these meaningful experiences.
So I think you went very quick, but there was a golden nugget in what you said, which is your judges are check writers.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Why is it so important? It's probably obvious, but I think it's worth explaining.
Because smart judges, knowledgeable judges pick the right companies. That's as simple as that.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things I helped to sharpen when I first came to this job 4 years ago, is you have to be a check writer in that domain to be a judge. In that domain is really important because if you're a biotech investor, like, you don't know anything about
Mhm.
semiconductor, right, and vice versa. Because as the startups are pitching, you're just listening. You're taking into how they pitch and what they pitch. You have to take everything at face value. But if you don't have deep domain expertise, you can't judge it, right? I mean, if you have deep domain, for instance, you in deep tech, you've heard, you've met 20, 30 companies here, and if you hear this pitch, you can sort of judge, right, where this company is at. So I think check writer, but also deep expertise in that particular domain, of where she are judging is a requirement for us.
Very nice. I want to ask a few more tactical questions because I think the audience would be curious about why some design choices. So the first one I have is, how important was it for XTC to be a non-profit?
Well, that decision was made before I came to this job, and I think because we want to be very clear, is this is a nonprofit that just does the work with no commercial interest, right? The mandate is really just do the great work to help support founders that are creating a better world, and that's aligned with UN SDGs. So I think it's a terrific sentiment for our founders, Young Sung and Bill Tai, to create this as a nonprofit. So that would be the reason.
Very nice.
Mhm.
Now, why is it shaped as competition?
That was the genesis. I mean, we have sort of evolved beyond competition, but it was source back when 10 years ago when this was founded. And if you talk to Bill, Bill would give you a whole his story behind it. Is that it really came from the community of kite surfers, right? Of technologists, conservationists, innovators, founders, and so forth. And it was on a kite surfing trip, and people were always talking about, what are you developing, what are you launching, and what are you working on? So then Bill and Young said, well, let's do a pitch competition. Let's just do a showcase around it. So that was sort of our genesis. But we've evolved to beyond just a competition because I don't think everything needs to be a competition. Um, and you know as well I know, and many people know that the winners of the competition may or may not be the winner in a commercial right setting. So I think, and also, the second place is perhaps just as good as the first place. So I think sometimes there's a competition aspect around it, but we evolve into doing showcases, and then also, as I mentioned, bring thought leadership discussions to it as well.
Can you share a bit about the best practices around competition? And then also I want to ask about this showcasing you're doing now. So I'm really looking for tips, things you've learned, best practices, both for competition and showcasing.
I think you have to be very clear when you launch a competition. What are you trying to achieve? I think one of the best practices is finding good anchor partners for the competition and
Mm,
think about ultimately what is the end outcome. As do you want to do your own event, or you want to attach it to a conference, because that helps to shape the contours of the competition, right? And what we've evolved to do is we partner with some of the largest tech conferences in the world, like CES, like TechCrunch, Viva Tech, NVIDIA GTC, to do so with them, for the reason that we want to go where the community is. And y'all are showing up to NVIDIA GTC, you're all showing up to CES. So it makes sense to partner with these tech conferences to do is to give our founders maximum visibility. Um, so I think there's some of the best practice around that, and I also think it's one of the best practices is sourcing deal flow. As you know, is an art,
mm.
and how do you source? How do you do push and pull? Right. So we have really great infrastructures for promoting our competition so that you're reaching the right founders. And that means very close promotional ties with incubators, accelerators, with innovation ecosystem builders, with other VCs that will help us and encourage their portfolio companies to apply to our competition or showcases. So I think you need to have a large network to activate the applications. So that's the push, right? You do like a blanket marketing pull for that. But also, we act as like a VC firm as well, as we will go out and scout companies. And that's really doing our own analysis is, well, who are the really great companies that are innovating this space, and it could be by geography depending on what we do. Many of our competitions have a global mandate, which means massively looking at where we need to look, and then go out and actively invite the founders one by one to invite them to apply. um,
Yeah. It's very much white glove.
that is completely white glove. And then also maintaining relationships. We have a whole database of these over 10,000 companies that I spoke about that have participated over the last few years. And it's also maintaining, make sure we have a communication channel with them that, the surviving companies, assuming growing as well, could also come back. Because startups are like fresh vegetables. Like you need fresh vegetables all the time for your startup showcases. So that I would say it's the secret sauce. You know, there's a tremendous amount of intention and strategy and work into making that happen, because ultimately, the quality of the companies, the quality of the speakers, the quality of the presenters, and how polished they are, that's really our product, right? That really speaks to the quality of our organization.
Actually, I need to ask about speakers because you're so good at getting amazing speakers. Any tip about how do you convince a speaker to take time for your conference?
Well, I think the number one credit goes to our to Young, Young's amazing community, that because I think we have incredible credibility as well as an innovation ecosystem, because that we're founded by legendary investors and executives, Young and Bill. So I think the strength of their names and our reputation really gets speakers to show up. And also where we put those speakers on stage at. So if we say, hey, you're going to be on stage at CES, or you're going to be on stage at TNW, which is one of the leading tech festivals in Europe, owned by Financial Times. There's certain also a lot of appeal
The
into doing
cachet.
that as well, caching to do it, and also who else is going to be on a panel with them, right? So if you invite them, you say, hey, these are your peers on the panel, and I think it's curating back to a very, very high quality experience for the speakers because they are sharing their time and they're sharing their expertise with us.
Very nice. Back to my earlier question. So, any tips on the showcasing?
Mm-hmm. Oh God, we've tried so many things. I feel like I'm building a scale up as well. That Extreme Tech Challenge is a scale up. So we have tried and iterated along the way. I've tried once to do showcasing without decks. I've tried all sorts of stuff, right? Which I
Yep.
don't think that
Yep.
quite works. I don't think that quite works for deep tech because I think people need to visualize it and have something to grab onto instead of just like a verbal pitch. I think it's um, a very brief pitch followed by judges Q&A, and I think it's adding programs around it, like I said, panel discussions and fireside chat, so that you can have some context around why we're doing this showcase and why sort of if we're doing something around semiconductor AI, why does chip design architecture matter, and how does this startup showcase fit within the themes.
So we are back to storytelling.
Yeah, we're back to storytelling, and I think diligent coaching of the founders before they get on that stage to make sure that their 2 minute pitch, 3 minute pitch is so polished, um, because it really speaks to the quality of our event. And ultimately, these startups are, our quote unquote product.
Now, you have the chance to work with amazing people from the VC world. You get to be exposed to how they think, how they make decisions. How does that make you even more impactful in your ecosystem function?
I've gotten to be really good at connecting the dots and creating synergies because, as you mentioned, there's so much to do, right? If you look at the mandate of two firms, and these are big, ambitious goals. So you have to be able to connect the dots and find synergies, so that I can have maximum ROI from my effort, but also the team's effort. So we don't do smallish events. We do a couple of big events throughout the year on big stages, because we do want to create bigger impact, right? And create some really really great content as well that's worth for people showing up. And you don't want to overuse or reuse a lot of the good people. So I think it goes back to just being very sharp about spotting what's important and spotting what's synergistic. And that could be from a relationship point of view, that could be from a deal sourcing point of view, that is also from a operational process point of view, that I think we've gotten to be really good at. And I try to hone over the last few years.
I think it's one of your own superpower, which is setting the right processes, but also the way you track all the data. You know exactly the number of countries, you know how many of your entrepreneurs get funded, 80% you mentioned earlier. I feel like you're tracking a myriad of data points and you manage to tell a story from that. Anything you can share with the audience about how you decide what you want to track and how you tell a story from that?
Yeah, and we spent a lot of time thinking about how to report metrics, right? And how do I evaluate my performance year after year? Is what are the metrics by which I have to be evaluated on? And what we arrived is both qualitative and quantitative, because the work of the ecosystem building is sometimes it doesn't have an immediate outcome, right? And sometimes the connection to outcome is not very direct. You know, that founder showed up to my pitch competition and then ended up raising a Series B. Can you attribute to this particular event? Sometimes yes, sometimes no, right? And how do we maintain relationship? So I think then we decide to track the number of founders that we attract, because I think that speaks to sort of our sourcing power and how compelling our value proposition is about our particular program events. We decided to track fundraising numbers because I think this, even if it's not directly related to how we help them fundraise, because that's hard to track, but it talks, but I think it validates that the finalists and winners from our competitions are indeed winners in, you know, beyond, right?
Mm.
If they're able to raise investments beyond our competition, that means our smart judges and mentors and evaluators are picking the right companies. So I think that's a really, really important metric. We also track the number of judges and VCs that we invite every year, whether they're new and then whether they're repeat, right? Because again, also that speaks to how compelling our work is for wonderful folks like you know, Nicola and your team, to help you to come back and be judges and judges and mentors, because you know, you get to see deal flow as well, and in many cases you get to see curated deal flow that are collectively selected by smart investors, peer investors of your domain. So I think it's, you know, some of these contours.
No, it's like a virtuous circle. It keeps the flywheel. It's a very positive flywheel where the higher the quality of the entrepreneurs, the better the jury, the more you want. It, but this is why I think the metrics, and I like the golden nugget, which is it's both qualitative and quantitative. And the quantitative, in a way, is straightforward, but the qualitative is always very hard. How do you get at the end of the year and you look at the qualitative? How do you think about, okay, this year was a 8 out of 10, or was it a 3 out of 10? How do you, when you separate the quantitative, how do you get the qualitative assessment, even to yourself?
Well, I have very specific MBOs. So, you know, the goal of the company, right? There's the goal of the organization. Here are the organization level goals. And then, you know, across ecosystem building, across marketing, across partnerships, across fundraising as well, is because this is a nonprofit. So I have to continuously fundraise and get sponsorship to support the great work that we're doing. So I do have specific MBOs and specific metrics beneath each category to make sure that my work is aligned, how I prioritize my time, that goes into accomplishing you know, the organization level and goals. So I do report to a board, and every year I would propose what the MBO should be, and the board would discuss and sign off on it. And you know, we stick by it, and those are your guiding principles for the year.
It's a really good process. Now, you talk about how you allocate your time. I think for everyone in the audience, they must be like, wait a second, you're doing two full-time jobs, if not more. How do you manage your time?
Well, I think it's two different jobs, but it's also is very synergistic, right? And there are, as you know, many people experience as well, there are peaks and valleys in what you do, right? They're very high season as you're launching something, um, but that said, it's still quite a number of work. Um, and I also think what's unique about Extreme Tech Challenge is also that, you know, as a person leading it, I have to be a functional. What was the word? You have to have different functional roles. As I have to program manage, right, on a leadership level. I have to give some marketing direction as well and storytelling. I have to fundraise sponsorships to support this nonprofit. Um, so I do work quite a bit, but I think I'm very, very focused on what are my big goals for this quarter. What are my big goals for you know, second half, first half of the year? What's my big goals of the for the whole entire year? So then I align my time and effort into doing it, because so you're not lost in the weeds, because you know, stuff in the weeds that happens all the time, every day. But how do I save my energy and how do I save my mental my mental space to tackle the big problems. So I think I've gotten to be, you know, not perfect, but I've gotten to be pretty good at it over the last few years.
I think you're extremely effective, like knowing what to do and what not to do. But then, even within the effectiveness, being efficient like you are, it's tough. And I think there's something you don't say, which is you must be saying no a lot to things which you wish to do, but you're saying no. How do you manage that? It's one where I struggle a lot. So I'm also listening to your tips on how do you say no.
I do say no a lot, and I've learned to say no even more. Um, because you have to, because otherwise I'm not able to devote, my time and my mental space into doing these things that really move the needle for us. So how I say no is, I love to help, but I'm not able to, fully be there to help you. But I always give them leads. Here are some of the people that I think you could reach out to that could have an interest in working with you on this. So so it's a no, but you give some advice. Yeah, you give advice like, I'm not, I don't have time for this, but this person might be better at helping you with this than me. And also, one thing I've learned is, many people have reached out to have like intro calls, right? Here, great, like let's have an intro call, let's get acquainted. And I ask for, what do you want to accomplish on this call? Especially if it's like a blind intro, a referral, then you want to ask, because just so that I understand what that person's expectation is, and whether I'm the right person for you to spend time with on this. It could be that, oh, I'm looking for investor intros. I'm doing a consumer app. Then I'm not the person, right? You might think I'm the person, but I'm not the person. So instead of going back and forth and wasting time and calendaring and all that, I ask, what is it that you're looking to accomplish? And if it's not something I can do, or I'm in a position to do, or I can't do, then I would say, well, I'm not, but here, you might want to look at these other organizations.
That's an amazing tip. And you do that already by email, not at the
Yes.
start of a call.
Oh, no, 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 by email. Because if you by email, if they're like, hey, I'm looking to meet someone from here, and if I can't, I'll be like, I don't know that person, or I can't, but you might want to reach out to this person instead. You have to do it by email, so that meeting doesn't even get on your calendar.
That is so good. Actually, I did this morning with someone reaching out asking for a call, and I say, sorry, but I'm too busy. What is it you want to know?
Yeah.
And then he asked basically about a job position, and then I could reply in one sentence what was the status, what he needs to do,
Mhm.
and that was it. And I saved 20 minutes call. But I am definitively going to take your tip, which is to be way more methodological. Do it every single time. Yeah.
Yeah, because what happened is, and I've done this in the past, right? I learned throughout my years as well, is if you take a call with someone that you can't help, coming out of a call, you just wasted that the time of that for that person. You wasted your own time, and also at the end, you're not able to help,
Yeah.
and you might have um, given that person false hope by taking the call. That person thinks that you might be able to help, and then you come out away as like, well, sorry, I can't. And it doesn't do the other person justice as well. So I think about it as in, editing my time in my life, but also helping the other person to be more productive and more efficient as well.
Wow. You even giving the audience and me a tip on how not to feel guilty about doing it. So that's really good.
Oh, absolutely. And my word for 2025, one of my words is editing, is editing things that don't move the needle, right? And also, personal life as well, right? How do you be more efficient at you know planning dinners? How do you be more efficient at running errands? I think it's just part of me. It's just kind of, if you put me in any situation, I would think about efficiency and effectiveness, in how I grocery shop.
You're an optimizer.
Yes, I optimize it. But I love it. I think it's fun. I think it's fun. I think it's a part of me. I could not do it.
What's also amazing is, I mean, every time I talk to you, you're in the present moment. You're not distracted. You're not thinking of something else. And that comes with a mental space, I think you mentioned earlier, which is if you have too many things juggling, you're not going to be good at anything. And I think you found the way to be ruthless in a way, but that allows you to do a better job. So I think I'm hoping the audience takes this as a golden nugget, which is there are tips you're sharing, which helps us to be more in the present moment by saying no to many other things, which doesn't move the needle.
And I want to talk a little bit more about being present because that's something I learned from meeting President Bill Clinton. I had the privilege of meeting him a number of years ago through a very, very small, curated event with no more than 20 people in that room with President Clinton. So you have that one on one time with him. But of course, you know, when President Clinton walks into the room, even with 20 people, everybody wants to talk to him, right? So everybody's trying to get his time and everybody's surrounding him. But what was so surprising is, you know, he talks to everybody and he talked to me. And for the moment that he spent time with me, his eyes never left my face. And he was like that with everybody he spoke to. It doesn't matter who else is around. Of course, like there are other people around listening, right? There's just only 20 of us and it's President Clinton speaking. But when he speaks to you, nobody else matters around you, that his focus is completely on you. And it could be 3 minutes, 5 minutes, but I think that communicates the ultimate respect.
Yeah.
I think that communicates the ultimate genuine connection that you can make with that person, um, and be in the moment. And I think that just it really changes. I think it builds a very trusting relationship as well, and that's something that I've learned and I've carried forward. In my own work is especially if you go to conferences, right? You meet so many people and you're talking to this person, but I've seen, you know, your other eyes looking, well, who else is walking by that I want to talk to, or
And you notice that so quickly.
right,
Yeah.
right. But um, you know, I think when I talk to you, I just recently saw you at CES. When I talk to you, I only talk to you. Nothing else matters around me, and I think it's an ultimate sort of act of respect
Yep.
is being that moment and being that conversation. And I love it when somebody gives me that space as well.
I That's probably the biggest golden nugget of this podcast because I think being in the present, really listening to the other person, that's when you go back to your concept of editing, it's about the highest quality time, the number of minutes you have where it can be so good ROI versus being distracted. And then you may have spent 10 minutes with someone, but totally distracted is nearly no value,
Exactly,
if not
exactly.
negative value, depending on how the person feels at the end of that time.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, a negative value, right?
Yeah,
But I
yeah.
like to think if there's a superpower, and I think that's probably a superpower.
I think so. Actually, I've heard the same about Bill Clinton being so good at being in the moment,
Yeah.
100% focused on the person. So I think your experience match what I've heard also, which is his superpower. He was such a good politician for being so articulate and being in the moment of the people that he talks to.
Yeah, so this brings me back to what you said before is how do you build an ecosystem and how do you make sure people come back, right, year after
Yeah.
year? Um, you know, I really boil down to creating meaningful experiences for all your stakeholders. You know, there's a lot of work that goes beyond that, behind that. But I think one component of that is you also make those genuine connections, being genuine with the people you bring to your organization. Um, and I think that that genuine disposition um, really helps to gel a community.
It's so important, but actually, even with your editing framework, I think being genuine is about being super effective. Because
Mhm.
if you're genuine and that resonates with the other person, you know it's valuable.
Right.
If you're not genuine, you will never know if it was actually valuable until much later when you realize it was a waste of time. So I think being genuine is the right thing to do, but it's also the effective way of tackling things.
Yeah, and it's I think consistently deliver high quality work, be very genuine, and also just being a pleasant person to be with. Nobody wants to work with people that are not pleasant. So, I
Well,
think.
some people do go, but I don't think they enjoy it. But I think I want to talk about another one of your superpowers, and I think it probably comes also from the fact you're very much in the present. You get to know the people, but you're really good at connecting people. And I'm not saying, oh, these two people should talk. You actually have a clear view about why there's an intersection of interest and why now is the right time to connect.
Mhm.
And you've practiced this for years, I'm sure. But is there any moment in time in the past where you improved something? There was a something that was a tipping point from being a good networking to be as good as you are now.
This is very high compliment coming from a networking master yourself. So I
No, no,
want to
no,
say
no.
that.
You're the next level.
Um, I think I have my own GPU. I have my own database in my brain. And I think this goes to having genuine connections and really listen when you're talking to that person. Because, sure, you take meeting notes, but you have to commit that person into your memory. And I've
You
always been really, really good at, and people have told me this, my own family have told me this, is that I've been really, really good at remembering people's names. um, and I'm really, really good at remembering conversations. And I think it's by having dedicated one-on-one time, right? I'm looking at your eyes, you're looking in my eyes. When we talk, I commit you and what you're all about and your interest in my brain. Of course, I can't do it for like every single person, but I think I'm very, very good at it. So that when I meet this new person, I'll be like, oh, wow, it makes sense for you guys to talk or something. So there is no rhyme or reason. I think it's just kind of a muscle I've exercised for the majority of my career. And then it comes, it's innate to me at this point.
Yeah, which is probably the closest to the real superpower, the meaning of a superpower, right?
Mhm.
Now, let's talk about something which I think is true for ecosystem function, it's true for venture capital, especially in the recent years. You have your highs, you have your lows. How do you manage both? Because since 2021, venture capital has been very, very tough. There is a lot of lows. At the same time, you have the competition and you have successes and you have some entrepreneurs doing extremely well. How do you manage the highs and the lows?
Um, I'm a naturally optimistic person. You know me for a while. So my natural instinct is always to solve problems. I solve problems for fun. Uh,
That's a good
you
one. Yeah.
I do. And, this is not about kind of personal life, but I will optimize and solve, like running a house, running a family, right? Running a house. That to me is problem solving as well. So I love to solve problem, any type of problem. So when you do have lows, for instance, big macro lows, that's when you build up your knowledge. That's when you self reflect to think about how I can improve my current processes. This is how when I spend a lot of time in um, even more time and stay on top of industry trends. The space that we're in, semiconductor AI, especially now, right? There's things are moving so fast. How do you stay on top of it? But this is also where I try to learn new things. Is you deal with the lows. You have more time to learn new things. For instance, I don't come from a marketing background, but storytelling is so important. So how do you do that? So I think it's building up and soaking up knowledge, being optimistic and ready to strike, right? Ready to strike and ready to launch when the time is right. But being very patient and making the right connections in the meantime. But I think I'm just a naturally optimistic person, so the lows don't really get me down this much.
Very nice. And it's true. I've noticed solving a problem gets you energized. It's like when you connect people, it energizes you. When you can find a way to solve a problem, the same way. Now you talk about generative AI. I think it's a good one to ask you is if you had your own thesis about where you think generative AI will go and where you think it will solve real problems versus just being a nice to have for people.
I think right now with Gen AI, 70% of the usage is really from B2C, right?
Mm.
And this is with the whole world got a taste of ChatGPT, and you see massive adoption on the B2C side. And 30% of that is enterprise adoption. So I think what's interesting to me over the next few years is seeing enterprise adoption of Gen AI, which will need to, for instance, innovations in these areas to happen. Like I believe in smaller and vertical specific models to address specific challenges. As AI co-pilots, right? So instead of a big general model, I think smaller model that means lower compute needs, right, and be very specific. And then I also think how to scale compute and from creating efficiencies and creating optimizing performance from chip architecture, right? How do you maximize on a data center operations on the hardware and software side? Much of these energy consumption, and right now a lot of the topic is how do you scale AI with the energy needs that haven't been a crisis. Right now, data centers consume about 3 to 4% of the total global energy consumption, and it's projected to use up to 12% in 2030. So how to solve that problem? So two areas. One is on the sort of on lower power chips. Right? How do you improve architecture? Much of the energy consumption is due to the movement of data. So to the extent that you can move things to edge computing or using photonics to transfer data in data centers. That increase the efficiency and reduce power consumption. And on the other hand, how do you solve the energy generation, storage, distribution aspect? Seeing solar, wind, small modular, nuclear coming, fusion. I think there's a bunch of innovations around that as well. Which, very ironically, I spent 6 years doing that earlier in my career, investing in power purchase agreement projects, renewable energy projects, and investments in the Middle East and Latin America. So I think it's looking at these two areas, and we're really entering this whole reasoning AI era. Is not just to aggregate and organize existing content, but how does the AI model teach itself and learn itself? So I think with the reasoning AI era, um, increasing compute needs, even with innovations like what DeepSeek has introduced, right? Hardware and software optimization. But all in all, like Jensen said, going to reasoning inference is going to be 100x to what the current consumption is from the pre-training side of the development. So I think all these areas to create the right infrastructure so that you can sustain a world that's going to be dominated by ubiquitous adoption of enterprise AI, well, Gen AI.
Gen AI, consumer and enterprise. I think what I like about your answer is that you can see all the potential, but also the power needs, and this is going to be a real scaling issue. I feel really blessed at TDK Ventures, where we've been investing in energy and digital transformation, so we can understand the overlap of the two. But when we think about, okay, let's have a fun question, which is if you could have three generative AI agents, Victoria 2, 3, and 4, and they have different personalities that you define. How could they help you to do a better job as ecosystem?
Oh, I love this question. Let me think about it. I have to be very thoughtful. Um, three co-pilots.
Yep. And they are thinking independently and they have their own personality and goals.
I think the first one is helping me to continuously identify who are the people that I'd like to invite to the ecosystem. So leading voices in right whatever areas that we're tackling,
Mm.
right? Ag tech, food tech, uh, um, semiconductor, AI chips, climate. So it's continually um, let me stay on top of right all the right people I should connect with. So essentially, it helps you to create a relationship graph of the top people on that. So that would be number one. Number two is connecting into, and I haven't done much of that just because of bandwidth. And but this year I also want to prioritize and meaningful engagements with foundations, tech foundations that are interested in what we're doing. So having a way to um, outreach, organize content, um, help us, help me manage that will be a really awesome co-pilot. And the third is, I don't know what exactly that is, but I think it has to be something for my own development, my own training and development. How do I be more efficient? How do I be better? How do I track my own growth? And you know, for me to be honest with myself.
I love it because one copilot is about doing more of what you already do, but the next two is about augmenting you.
Yeah, yeah.
And that is really cool to have that sense of how you would structure a team of agents. So thank you for having fun with me. Thank you for the podcast and all your golden nuggets you shared with the audience. You were incredibly genuine and at times vulnerable and sharing how you do things. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Nicola. It's always a pleasure to catch up with you, and I am, of course, a fan of your work as well. So thank you for giving us the space to discuss.
All right. We have a bonus feature with Victoria. We just realized at the end of the podcast we had something extra to ask. Victoria, one more question. Tell me about your TV show.
Yes, I have a TV show. So very serendipitously, I was invited to go on a program on a channel called Taiwan Plus, which is Taiwan's version of CNN, to talk about deep tech and the state of the economy. And this was in summer 2023. So apparently, I did an all right job, and they ended up giving my own TV show where I am on-air host as well as co-producer. And it's a show to profile extraordinary founders of Taiwanese descent that are building interesting companies. So, first season was shot in Silicon Valley.
And when is it starting and when we will see it on TV?
It is now in post production, so it's going to launch in May. So it's the channel is Taiwan Plus, and it's going to be on cable in Taiwan on TV channel, as well as available on the company website or the TV channel's website, and also so those are 1 hour episodes, and there's going to be cut a 10-minute version for each episode that's going to be available on YouTube. So I'm interested, and it's my first foray into TV, but I think media is a very powerful tool to help tell interesting stories and highlight amazing founders that are just doing some extraordinary things.
So I can see the thread between everything you do, which is all about entrepreneurs and helping them shine and be successful. But we just talked earlier about how do you say no to many things that comes to you. And I feel like you have perfected the way of saying no in a very helpful way.
Mm-hmm.
But here it's one way you have to learn how to say yes to the good opportunity. So how did you consider the yes when you knew this was not going to be a small project?
Right. I look at if this work can help with my work, my job, and I think um, and it's such an extraordinary opportunity, right? And I never thought I would do a TV show. But I think what I've done over the last few years is I've done many speaking engagements at conferences. I've hosted events. I've been a moderator, facilitator of our pitch showcases, competitions, onstage program. So it's actually quite interesting to be interviewed today because I'm usually the interviewer. I'm usually in your position, Nicola. So I say yeses to things that I think are interesting, but also can be hugely beneficial and synergistic with my work. And I knew it was going to be a lot of work, but I didn't know how much work it really truly ended up being. As a co-producer, I source the companies. I vet the companies. I do pre-filming, vetting, coordination, learning their stories, not just interviewing the founders, but also their VCs and doing tours. And to be a good interviewer, you have to know the technology, you have to know their story. So they can't be cookie cutter, right, conversations. You have to double click as conversation flows. So that itself is a lot of prep behind the scene, but that's something that I've gotten to be very used to doing, right, with hosting Extreme Tech Challenge events or events for Walden Catalyst. But I really think a skill that I've honed over the years is public speaking, or I like to get better at, is how do you articulate for any audience. And for my own selfish objective, I thought this would help me be even a more articulate presenter.
So I agree, you're already amazing public speaker, but tell us if there is something you learned during the TV show that made you even better. Because if there are something you learned that at your level, I want to know.
There is very little room for error on TV, which means that, and I think it's something that I've honed before is what we talked about is when you talk to someone, you have to look that into that person's eyes. So that's really important when you're on TV is when you're speaking to the camera, your eyes have to be staring into the camera, which is really just a black dot, right? It's like a black hole.
Yeah, yeah,
But you
yeah.
have to imagine there's somebody behind it because as you're talking to the camera, you have to you have your whole focus should be on the camera. You like if your eyeballs are looking left or looking right, it's very obvious that you're not looking at the audience. And something I've mastered, which I think I'm quite proud of, is something called a walk and talk. So a walk and talk is, and you'll see in the beginning of each episode is I will walk and give a little overview of what the episode is all about. You know, today we're going to be visiting a company that's using, AI and sensor technology to help us enhance, fish farming, right? So you have to articulate a very crisp script, and there's no teleprompter anyway. And then you have to walk, you have to walk slow, talk faster, eyes fully on the camera. They're filming you, walking at the
Wow.
same speed as the camera, because otherwise your face will be like this, big and
Yeah.
and then do that within a couple of takes. So I would say that's something I've learned from doing TV. Walk and talk.
That's amazing. Now, I have two more questions. One is you clearly said yes to the TV show, and I'm sure it was about entrepreneurs, but I'm sure you negotiated a little bit to be really more with your mission in mind than just what they had in mind to start. How did you manage to make it sure that this was fit for your mission?
I think I think highlighting amazing entrepreneurs is the mission. But I wanted to be a co-producer because I wanted to curate the content. Because you film 8 months before the show is on TV, which means if you don't pick a good company, it might die, right? 8 months down the road. And so I wanted to be a co-producer because I want to be in charge of finding the companies and also vetting and deciding who we're going to interview. And then I believe, great founders and great stories, venture-backed companies that have the potential to create ventures of lasting value ultimately are good stories to showcase.
Now, I believe luck is 99% hard work and preparation and having a prepared mind. Tell us about the story about how you got into that TV show.
This was summer of 2023, and just through my network and actually a distant relative, and she is a producer of one of the producers of this channel, and she knew I was going to be in Taipei for summer vacation, and she's like, "Hey, there's this show, and we'd love for you to come on it." But I believe in just always being prepared so that every time you speak or every time you're in an event, this goes back to consistently deliver quality product, quality experiences, quality deliverables. And to be on that TV show, and you can Google me and you can Google Taiwan Plus, you'll find the episode, is that it was a half an hour show, but there was a tremendous amount of preparation that went behind the scene on my part, right? Because I want to show up prepared. I want to show up to make sure I can add the most value to the conversation. So always be prepared and just hone your craft. There is no shortcut. I wish I had like a better answer, but
No, no, I stand corrected. You don't have two full-time jobs. You have three full-time jobs.
oh, but that filming is over and it'll launch in May, and I'm excited to see how it turns out because I haven't seen the whole show come
I
out
am
yet.
sure it's a full-time job because you're going to get a season two.
It has to be with the permission of my bosses.
Well, Victoria, thank you for this bonus feature and sharing about this TV show. I'm going to make sure I watch it. I'm not sure if it's when I'm back in Taiwan. As you know, I have a place in Gauchon, but I'll make sure to watch it. Thank you so much, Victoria.
Thank you so much, Nicola.